Hey there, my name is Jared, and welcome to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. In this episode, we'll be looking at the religion of Islam, the second largest religion in the world. Welcome to the show. Over the last 3 episodes, we have covered the major religions/philosophies in the East, those being Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. Now we come to the Middle East and start getting into the Abrahamic religions. Let's start with Islam. In the first section, we'll look at some basic history, how and when Islam came about. In the next section, we'll get an overview of the beliefs of Islam, and in the last section, we'll get to a sense of how practitioners of Islam, called Muslims, go about life. Before we go to break, here is some food for thought. What are the 3 major religions tied to a man named Abraham? We'll be right back.
So alien from anything that we understand in the West that it may stretch your skulls a little. I don't know. Because, of course, integration means that you get 2 aspects of yourself together and acknowledge them both as you, the conscious and the unconscious. The power of the ego So in every art, one realizes there comes a point where your will is exhausted. You've tried everything to make something work, and it won't work. And then to achieve...
Welcome back to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. To answer the question before the break, the 3 major religions that are centered around a man named Abraham are Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. We are really going to do these religions out of chronological order. The chronological order would be Judaism, Christianity, and then Islam. But we are traveling from the Eastern religions towards the West, and first up is Islam, the youngest of the 3. To better understand how Islam is separated from Christianity and Judaism, it's best to hear an abbreviated version of the story of Abraham. So originally, Abraham's name was Abram. Abram grew up in the land of Ur, of the Chaldees. He married a woman named Sarai. Sarai was barren, meaning she couldn't bear children. Eventually, Abram and almost his entire family left Ur and attempted to relocate to the land of Canaan. Only they didn't quite make it. They settled somewhat short of their goal in a place called Haran. Haran was also the name of Abram's brother, though it is unclear where the name of the city came from. After Abram's dad died, the rest of the family, following a promise made by God, continued on to the land of Canaan. God came to Abram in a vision and repeated this promise. The promise to have descendants as numerous as the stars. After 10 years, Sarai had not conceived, and Sarai offered her Egyptian handmaiden Hagar to Abram to bear him a son, to fulfill this prophecy. Hagar bore him a son and named him Ishmael. 13 years later, when Abram was 99 years old, God repeated the promise of descendants as numerous as the stars, reminded him, really, and changed Abram's name to Abraham. Abraham means father of many nations. God changed Sarai's name to Sarah and said that she will bear him a son as well. Abraham then received the instructions for the covenant, which is basically a pact between God and man. And the instructions of that covenant were of circumcision. And the circumcision was to be the sign or the seal of that covenant. Abraham, now at this point, laughed at the thought of a man that is 100 years old being a dad. But immediately after his encounter with God, Abraham at 99 or 100, and his entire household, including his son Ishmael at 13, were circumcised. If you don't know what circumcised is, it's cutting off the foreskin of the male genitalia. You can look that up if you care to understand more. But to do that at 99 or 13, I don't think would be fun. It was a big deal for them to do that, and his entire household to do that. But Sarah bore a son exactly 1 year after and named him Isaac. So now Abraham, who used to be Abram, has two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael is the oldest. Isaac is younger than Ishmael. Now Islam is founded on the idea that Ishmael, being the eldest, had a right to be the heir of Abraham, and that his descendants were the ones God promised, the descendants of Ishmael. Whereas Jews and Christians believe that the original promise of God, Isaac, who was the original promise of God, that Sarah would bear a child, they believe that Isaac is the rightful heir and his descendants are the promise of God. Jesus of Nazareth is among these descendants on the side of Isaac, and the prophet Muhammad is among the descendants of Ishmael. This is where the split occurs, and this brings us to the founding of Islam by the prophet Muhammad in the year 610 AD. Islamic tradition views Muhammad, born in 570 AD and died June 8th, 632, they view him as the seal of prophets, and we'll come back to that phrase and what it means in just a minute. And also that he was sent by God to the rest of mankind. During the last 22 years of Muhammad's life, beginning at the age of 40 in 610 AD, according to the earliest surviving biographies, Muhammad reported receiving revelations that he believed to be from God, conveyed to him through the archangel Gabriel while he was meditating in a cave. Muhammad's companions memorized and recorded the content of these revelations, and that is known as the Quran. Getting back to the seal of the prophets, among Muslims, it is generally regarded to mean that Muhammad was the last of the prophets sent by God, or that prophecy was sealed by God after Muhammad, and Muhammad is the last that God will send or speak through. Muhammad was born and raised in Mecca. His mom was Jewish, and his dad, Abdullah, was a descendant of Ishmael. He grew up and became a shepherd and a merchant. At some point, Muhammad adopted the practice of meditating alone for several weeks every year in a cave on Mount Hira near Mecca. Islamic tradition holds that in one of his visits to Mount Hira, the angel Gabriel began communicating with him in the year 1610. Muhammad's mission involved preaching monotheism, one God, instead of polytheism, many gods. The Quran demanded Muhammad to proclaim and praise the name of his Lord and instructed him not to worship idols or associate other deities with God, but to only worship the one God. Muhammad concentrated on quietly building a small but spiritually strong community. Around 613 AD, initiating the phase of public speaking, one day he climbed Mount Asafara and called out the tribal chiefs. After receiving assurances that the chiefs, who reportedly never heard Muhammad tell lies, would believe him, he declared the oneness of God. Later, Muhammad organized dinners in which he conveyed and advocated the substance of his message. Most Meccans, those that lived in Mecca, ignored Muhammad. A few mocked him, while some others actually became his followers. During this time, Muhammad, while in Mecca, preached to the people, imploring them to abandon polytheism and to worship one God. Although some converted to Islam, the leading Meccan authorities persecuted Muhammad and his followers. This resulted in the migration to Abyssinia of Muslims. Many early converts to Islam were the poor, foreigners, and former slaves. The Meccan elite felt that Muhammad was destabilizing their social order by preaching about one God and about racial equality, and that in the process he put dangerous ideas into the heads of the poor and of the slaves. After 12 years of the persecution of Muslims by the Meccans, Muhammad's relatives, Muhammad and the Muslims, migrated in 622 AD to the city of Yathrib, current-day Medina. There, Muhammad established his political and religious authority. The Constitution of Medina was formed, instituting a number of rights and responsibilities for the Muslims, Jews, Christians, and pagan communities of Medina, bringing them within the fold of one community. Muhammad died in 632 AD, and Islam went through many changes on its way to being the second largest religion in the world. When we come back, we'll get into an overview of what Muslims believe. Before we go to break, here's a question to ponder. Is Jesus part of the Muslim religion? I'll give you a minute to answer, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. To answer the question before the break, is Jesus part of the Muslim religion or the Islam religion? The answer is yes, he is, but only as a prophet. Let's take a look at the Islamic Creed, also called the 6 Articles of Faith, to get a better understanding. For Muslims, their faith is represented in 6 axioms, or an axiom is that which commands itself is evident. Number 1 is belief in the existence and oneness of God, who Muslims call Allah. Number 2, belief in the existence of angels. Number 3, belief in the existence of the books of which God is the author, those being the Quran, said to be revealed to Muhammad, the Gospel, said to be revealed to Jesus, the Torah, said to be revealed to Moses, and Psalms, said to be revealed to David. The 4th belief is in the existence of all prophets, Muhammad being the last of them, Jesus being the second to last, and the others sent before them. The 5th belief is in the existence of the Day of Judgment. In that day, humanity will be divided into 2 groups, that of paradise and that of hell. These groups are themselves composed of subgroups. And the 6th and final belief in the 6 articles of faith is the belief in the existence of God's predestination, whether it involves good or bad. Belief in these articles is necessary and obligatory upon all Muslims. Let's briefly take a look at each one. Let's start with number 1, belief in the existence and oneness of God, who Muslims call Allah. Islam rejects polytheism and idolatry, as well as the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. In Islam, God is beyond all comprehension, and thus Muslims are not expected to think of him as having a human form. God, or Allah as they say, is traditionally seen as the personal name of God, a term with no plural or gender being ascribed. It is used by Muslims and Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews in reference to God, whereas Ilah is a term, I'm probably saying that wrong, so don't quote me, but that is the term for a deity or a god in general. Other non-Arab Muslims might use different names as much as Allah, for instance, Khoda in Persian. Number 2, the belief in the existence of angels. Belief in angels is fundamental to Islam, as this is where Muhammad received his revelation from, the Archangel Gabriel. The Quran is the principal source for the Islamic conception of angels. Some of them, such as Gabriel and Michael, are mentioned by name in the Quran. Others are only referenced to by their function. Duties assigned to angels include, for example, communicating revelations from God, glorifying God, recording every person's actions, and taking a person's soul at the time of death. Number 3, the belief in the existence of the books of which God is the author. The Quran said to be revealed by Muhammad, the Gospel said to be revealed by Jesus, and the Torah said to be revealed by Moses, and also Psalms said to be revealed to David. The Islamic holy books are the records which most Muslims believe were dictated by God to various prophets. Muslims believe that parts of the previously revealed scriptures, the Torah and the Gospels, had become distorted, either in interpretation and text or both. The Quran is viewed by Muslims as the final revelation and literal word of God, and is widely regarded as the finest literary work in the classical Arabic language. Number 4, belief in the existence of all the prophets, Muhammad being the last, Jesus being second to last, and all the others sent before them. Muslims identify the prophets as those humans chosen by God at different times in the past to convey all messages, warnings or glad tidings, teachings or way of life, and legislation or public life to people while being in contact with God mostly through revelation. According to the Quran, the prophets were instructed by God to bring the will of God to the people of the nations. Muslims believe that prophets are human and not divine, though some are able to perform miracles to prove their claim. Islamic theory says that all of God's messengers preach the same message of Islam, submission to the will of God. The Quran mentions the names of numerous figures considered prophets in Islam, including Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, among others. Number 5, belief in the existence of the Day of Judgment, and in that day, humanity being divided into two groups, that of paradise and that of hell. Belief in the Day of Resurrection is also crucial for Muslims. It is believed that the time of the Day of Resurrection is preordained by God, but unknown to man. The Quran emphasizes bodily resurrection, a break from the pre-Islamic Arabian understanding of death. Muslims believe all humankind will be judged by their good and bad deeds and consigned to paradise or hell. The Quran lists several sins that can condemn a person to hell, such as disbelief in God and dishonesty. However, the Quran makes it clear that God will forgive the sins of those who repent if He so wills. Good deeds such as charity, prayer, and compassion towards animals will be rewarded with entry into heaven. Muslims view heaven as a place of joy and blessings. Mystical traditions in Islam place their heavenly delights in the context of an ecstatic awareness of God. And finally, number 6, the belief in the existence of God's predestination, whether it involves good or bad. The concept of divine will is referred to as Al-Qar. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that horribly, but it basically means, it actually derives from a root word that means to measure. Everything good and bad is believed to have been decreed or predestined. Faith, called Iman, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong as well, but faith, called Iman, I-M-A-N, has been delineated in both the Quran and Hadith. Now the Hadith, we know what the Quran is, but the Hadith is the Arabic word for things like speech, report, account, and narrative. Hadith in Islam refers to what Muslims believe to be a record of the words, actions, and the silent approval of the Prophet Muhammad. Hadith have been called the backbone of Islamic civilization, and the authority of Hadith is a source for religious law and moral guidance second only to that of the Quran. Scriptural authority for Hadith comes from the Quran, which enjoins Muslims to emulate Muhammad and obey his judgments, in verses such as 24:54 and 33:21. While the number of verses pertaining to law in the Quran is relatively few, Hadith gives direction on everything from details of religious obligations to the correct forms of salutations and the importance of benevolence to slaves. Thus, the great bulk of the rules of Sharia, which is Islamic law, are derived from Hadith rather than the Quran. According to the Quran, Iman, or faith, must be accompanied by righteous deeds, and the two together are necessary for entry into paradise or heaven. When we get back, we'll look at the 5 pillars of the Islamic religion and how they go about righteous deeds. Before we take our last break, here is a question to ponder. If you do have a religion, whatever it may be, or even if you don't, is there something that you are required to do every day? Here's a minute to think it over, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Jared Show Wisdom Podcast. Did you come up with an answer to the question before the break? Is there something you are required to do every day? For many, it might be going to work. For Muslims, it is much, much more than that. So far, we've covered what Muslims believe and the history of Islam. Let's get into how this plays out in everyday life. The ritual obligations of Muslims are called the 5 pillars. They are acknowledged and practiced by Muslims throughout the world. They are viewed as compulsory for individuals who genuinely wish to pursue a life like that which Muhammad led, which was a prudent and mindful life. Like other religions, Islam holds certain practices to be standard. However, that does not imply that all individuals who regard themselves as Muslim necessarily observe them. So, what are the 5 pillars? Let's get into it. The first pillar of Islam is the assertion of faith, combining the themes of unity and mercy that are found in the Quran. There are 2 assertions of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. This set statement is normally recited in Arabic. It is essential to utter it to become a Muslim and to convert to Islam. The first assertion promotes the essential unity of the faith, proclaiming that there is no God but God. The statement, no God but God, is a major component of the Islamic faith, for it asserts the monotheistic aspect of Islam, promoting unity of God as the source of existence. The second assertion demonstrates God's essential mercy. This prayer proclaims Muhammad as the last prophet, and it uses Muhammad as the prime example of guidance for all Muslims. Muslims believe that Muhammad received revelation that was distorted by earlier communities, such as Jewish and Christian societies, and Muhammad was the recipient of the Quran's guidance himself, and now is bearer of this guidance for the rest of the Muslim community throughout history. The Shahada, or profession of faith, is said 5 times a day during prayer. It is the first thing said to a newborn and the last thing to a person on their deathbed, showing how the Muslim prayer and the pillars are instrumental from the day a person is born until the day that they die. The second pillar is prayer. Before a prayer is observed, absolutions are performed, including washing one's hands, face, and feet. Absolutions is basically cleansing yourself physically. A caller chants aloud, and from a raised place in the mosque. Verses from the Quran are recited either loudly or silently. These prayers are a very specific type of prayer and a very physical type of prayer called prostrations. These prayers are done 5 times a day at set strict times, with the individual facing Mecca. The prayers are performed at dawn, noon, afternoon, evening, and night. The names, which I'm going to butcher, I do apologize, bear with me. But the names are according to the prayer times. Fajr, spelled F-A-J-R, which is dawn. Duhar, which is D-H-U-H-R, noon. Azar, which is A-S-R, afternoon. Maghrib, evening. And Ishna, or night. The Fajr prayer is performed before sunrise. Dahar is performed in midday after the sun has surpassed its highest point. Asar is the evening prayer before sunset. Maghrib is the evening prayer after sunset. And Isha is the night prayer. All of these prayers are recited while facing in the direction of Kaaba and Mecca and form an important aspect of the Muslim community. Muslims must wash before prayer. This washing is called wudu, purification. It's spelled W-U-D-U. The prayer is accompanied by a series of set positions, including bowing with hands on knees, standing, prostrating and sitting in a special position, not on the heels, nor on the buttocks. At every change in position, God is great, is said, and it is a fixed tradition that has been recited in each posture. A Muslim may perform their prayer anywhere, such as in offices, universities, and fields. However, the mosque is a preferable place for prayer because the mosque allows for fellowship. These prayers may also be observed individually if one's not able to go to the mosque. Muslims offer special congregational prayers on Friday instead of the normal prayer just after noon. The 5 daily prayers can never be waived, even for those not feeling well. They may pray in bed and even lying down. When traveling, one may observe the afternoon prayers following one another. Also, the sunset and late evening prayers can be combined too. The third pillar of Islam is zakat. Again, I'm probably not saying that correctly. I apologize. But zakat, or almsgiving or charity, zakat means purification, which indicates that a payment makes the rest of one's wealth legally and religiously pure. By following this pillar, that of almsgiving or charity, Muslims have to deduct certain amount of their income to support the Islamic community, and it usually is about 2.5% of an individual's income. This practice is not found in the Quran, but rather in the Hadith. The tax is used to take good care of the holy places and mosques in the individual's specific Muslim community, or to give assistance to those in need, or those who are impoverished. The word zakat can be defined as purification and growth because it allows an individual to achieve balance and encourages new growth. The principle of knowing all of that belongs to God is essential to purification and growth. Zakat is obligatory for all Muslims who are able to do so. It is the personal responsibility of each Muslim to ease the economic hardship of others and to strive towards eliminating inequality. Zakat consists of spending a portion of one's wealth for the benefit of the poor or needy, such as debtors or travelers. A Muslim may also donate more as an act of voluntary charity rather than to achieve additional divine reward. Also, Muslims are required to give back to the poor, specifically through financial support, on the streets in addition to the zakat. Zakat shows how the Islam faith impacts the financial situation of a believer, drawing into all aspects of life. There are 5 principles that should be followed when giving the zakat, or charity. Number 1, the giver must declare to God his intention to give the zakat, or charity. Number 2, the zakat must be paid on the day that it is due. Number 3, after the offering, the prayer must not exaggerate on spending his money more than usual means. Number 4, payment must be in kind. This means if one is wealthy, then he or she needs to pay a portion of their income. If a person does not have much money, then they should compensate for it in different ways, such as good deeds and good behavior towards others. And number 5, the zakat must be distributed in the community from which it was taken. And that is the 3rd pillar. The 4th pillar out of the 5 of Islam is fasting. Fasting takes place or refraining from eating food. Fasting takes place during Ramadan, which is the holy month in the Islamic calendar, lunar calendar. This means the month of Ramadan shifts 11 days each year. Fasting is directly stated in the Quran, saying, "Eat and drink until the whiteness of the day becomes distinct from the blackness of the night at dawn, then complete the fast till night." The fast occurs from dawn to sunset every day, during which time believers are expected to prohibit themselves from any food, drink, sexual intercourse, or smoking. However, after sunset and before dawn, individuals can participate in any of the actions previously stated as they desire. The reason for fasting during Ramadan is to remind Muslims that all individuals are similarly needy upon the assistance of God, and that there are less lucky individuals who need their assistance. Ramadan is a period of reflection when Muslims are called upon to recharge their faith, increase their charity, and make apology. In the Quran, the month of Ramadan was first revealed to Muhammad. Ramadan fasting ends with the festival of the breaking of the fast, which lasts for 3 days. Of the first day of the festival, there's a meeting at the mosque for prayer celebration, and each family head gives money for alms. Muslims traditionally break their fast in the month of Ramadan with dates, like those offered by this date seller in Kuwait City, as was the recorded practice of Muhammad. 3 types of fasting are recognized by the Quran: ritual fasting, fasting as compensation for a recompense, and ascetic fasting. Ritual fasting is an obligatory act during the month of Ramadan. Muslims must abstain from food and drink from dawn to dusk during this month, and are to be especially mindful of other sins. Fasting is necessary for every Muslim that has reached puberty, unless he or she suffers from a medical condition which prevents them from doing so. The fast is meant to allow Muslims to seek nearness and to look for forgiveness from God, to express their gratitude to and dependence on Him, atone for their past sins, and to remind them of the needy. During Ramadan, Muslims are also expected to put more effort into following the teachings of Islam by refraining from violence, anger, envy, greed, lust, profane language, gossip, and really to try to get along with fellow Muslims better. In addition, all obscene and irreligious sights and sounds are to be avoided. Fasting during Ramadan is obligatory, but is forbidden for several groups for whom it should be very dangerous and extremely problematic. These include pre-pubescent children, those with a medical condition such as diabetes, elderly people, and pregnant or breastfeeding women. Observing fast is not permitted for menstruating women as well. Other individuals for whom it is considered acceptable not to fast are those who are ill or traveling. Missing fasts usually must be made up for soon after, although the exact requirements vary according to the circumstance. And finally, we come to the fifth and last pillar. The final pillar of Islam is the pilgrimage. During one's life, a Muslim is required to make the pilgrimage to Mecca during the 12th month of the lunar calendar year. This ritual consists of making a journey to Mecca wearing only 2 white sheets, so all of the pilgrims are identical and there is no class distinction among them. Ladies wear a less complex type of their ordinary dress. Pilgrims put the white sheets on when they enter the sanctuary area of Mecca and enter a state of purity. After a Muslim makes the trip to Mecca, he or she is known as a Hajj or Hajjah, one who made the pilgrimage to Mecca. The main rituals of the Hajj include walking 7 times around the Kaaba, touching the black stone, traveling 7 times between Mount Safa and Mount Marwa, and symbolically stoning the devil in Mina. When at Mecca, the pilgrims go to the Kaaba in the mosque and walk around it in a circle. You may have seen this before. They then pray together in official ceremonies, and then they go out to perform the standing ceremony to remember the farewell sermon of Muhammad on the Arafat. On the return trip, pilgrims stop in Mina, where they throw 7 stones at stone pillars that represent Satan, as to express their hatred for Satan. They then return to Mecca for final ceremonies by circling the Kaaba 7 times, and then leave Mecca to journey back home. Ability, physical strength, and economic needs can play a role in whether or not an individual is able to complete this pilgrimage. For the Quran specifically says that only those capable of making the pilgrimage are required. The reason for this journey is to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad, hoping to gain enlightenment as Muhammad did when he was in the presence of God. The pilgrimage of the Hajjah is in the Quran. The pilgrimage, or the Haji, is honored in the Muslim community. Islamic teachers say that Hajj should be an expression of devotion to God, not a means to gain social standing. The believer should be self-aware and examine their intentions in performing the pilgrimage. This should lead to constant striving for self-improvement. A pilgrimage made at any time other than the Hajj season is called an Umrah, and while not mandatory, is strongly recommended. Also, they make a pilgrimage to the holy city of Jerusalem in their almsgiving feast. Religion in Muslim life isn't a major factor. It's the only factor. It isn't something they do on one day of the week, like Sunday. It's done every day, throughout each day. It's not part of their life. It is their life. In this episode, we have looked at how Islam came about through the Prophet Muhammad in the year 1610 AD. We have learned a little about the founder of Islam, Muhammad, and we have seen how Muhammad's followers, called Muslims, live according to their beliefs. In the next episode, we'll stay in the Middle East and look at a common opponent to Muslims and Islam, that being Jews and Judaism. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, and you're looking forward to more comparative religious study, please subscribe and leave a comment and let me know. If you would like to ask me a question and perhaps correct something I have said, please feel free to email me at TheJarredShow WisdomPodcast @gmail.com. In case you didn't get all that, there is a link in the description below. Please do not hesitate to do so. Next episode will be on Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for watching or listening, whichever you prefer. And as always, and in always, may God bless you. Thanks.